Hey guys, Joe here with SimVRlabs, and we're going to talk about Yoke, Manip, Rotate, when to use it, and how it all works, what these crazy numbers mean, and how to tune it up in the vrconfig to get your Yoke feeling really good in realistic mode. Now, I've already put out a tutorial on Yoke, Manip, Translate, and this is a tutorial on Yoke, Manip, Rotate. Now, why would you use a Yoke, Manip, Rotate? Well, you use Yoke, Manip, Rotate when you have a yoke that does not come out of the panel on a shaft. So when you pull a yoke back or push a yoke forward on its pitch, if it's sliding in and out of your aircraft's panel on a shaft, that's a straight back towards you and a straight out away from you. That's a translate. So anytime you're using that kind of yoke, you would use Yoke, Manip, Translate. Yoke, Manip, Rotate is literally for everything else. It's for flight sticks, and it's for console style yokes, where it rotates from the floor, from the bottom of the floor. Now, let me show you what a Yoke, Manip, Rotate looks like here in the vrconfig. You can see it. I'm actually going to zoom up one more time here so you can see it even better. So here it is, Yoke, Manip, Rotate. So when you're in your vrconfig, you do begin manip, okay, drag XY, and then you do the two data refs just like normal, just like I showed you in the Yoke, Manip, Translate. Here's where it gets different. So instead of Yoke, Manip, Translate, you type in Yoke, Manip, Rotate, and then what you're going to do is you're going to have two distinct islands of numbers, okay? So I'm going to put a space between the two islands, and we're going to talk about what each island is, okay? This island here is your pitch island. Your pitch island comes first, and then this is your roll island, okay? Now, inside your island, you're going to have a couple sets of things, okay? You've got a set of these three numbers, you got a set of these three numbers, and then you've got these two. And I'll tell you what these numbers, these little chunks of numbers are, okay? First three numbers are the X, Y, and Z of the pitch axis. Now, what the crap does that mean? Well, let me show you. We're going to look at two different manipulators here, two different yokes, two different yoke styles. This is a flight stick. This is a flight stick out of the SR-71, okay? And it's got, these are the two animation axes for it. It's the pitch axis and the roll axis. Now, think of these as pegs that go through holes down here at the bottom. So, if this one rolls through like this, and it's a peg that goes through holes here, which axis do you think this is, the pitch or the roll? Well, I can tell you it's the pitch, because when you pull back, it's going to rotate around this axis. And when you push forward, it's going to rotate around this axis. If I come in here and I click on animation time, right, and I take this pitch ratio and I roll it up, see, it pitches backwards and forwards, pitching on this axis that I have highlighted. Now this axis is moving. Well, it's moving because it's the roll axis, and it's gonna have to pitch with the pitch axis so you can roll on a pitched axis. Watch this. So if I roll it backwards, now when I roll, see how it needs to roll kind of tilted backwards? So that's why this roll axis is rolling, but it's slave to the pitch axis. The pitch axis is this one here. And those three numbers that I showed you are actually the point. It's literally right where my mouse head is. That's the point. It's a point in space. So it's a point in space relative to the aircraft's center of gravity, and that's made in Plane Maker, blah, 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 regardless. That's the point. Now, how did I get those three numbers? Well, once you bring your yoke into the cockpit OBJ, or if your yoke is already into the cockpit OBJ, you're going to find it in here. And you're going to find it under yoke pitch ratio, okay? So so you're looking for yoke, there's yoke roll ratio, you're looking for yoke pitch ratio, boom, there it is, okay? There's yoke pitch ratio. And it's going to be under the anim trans line. So anim trans, that's your X, Y, and Z location of that little point in space. Boom, there it is. So you put that in, those are your first three numbers, boom. Point in space of the pitch axis is under anim trans X, Y, and Z. 100. What the heck is 100? Well, let's look. If I go back in here and I look here. First of all, let's talk about what 1, 0, 0 is. This is your pitch axis, right? Okay. First of all, 1 is a meter. 1 is 1 meter. If this little yellow line started here and ended here, that would be about a half a meter. So it'd be 0.500, right? So 1 is just an arbitrary number. They basically set, the developers just set an animation line axis, and they just give it a 1, just because it's a good arbitrary number. So if you load up the cockpit OBJ and you see all these long yellow lines, you're like, why are those all so long? Well, chances are they're all 1 meter long. Okay. Now, what does the 1, 0, 0 mean? Well, things in the cockpit OBJ go X, Y, and Z. 1 is on the X, which means side to side. So is this one going side to side? Absolutely. So it gets a 1. Y is up and down. Is this thing going up and down at all? Nope. So Y is 0. Z is the in and out, forward and backward, towards you and away from you. That's the Z axis. Is it going towards you and away from you at all? No. So it's a 0. So 1, 0, 0 means it's got a length on the X, nothing on the Y, nothing on the Z. That's how you also know that this is the pitch axis. So 1, 0, 0 is your pitch axis, and that's almost always universal on a Yoke Manip rotate. It's always going to be a 1, 0, 0. Now, it could be a negative 1, 0, 0, and that's literally exactly the same thing. It's just on how they built it. They could build it with a 1 or a negative 1. Both of them work the same way. Whatever it says in the cockpit OBJ, just put it in your vrconfig. So you got your point in space on the anim trans, your 1, 0, 0. Now, how did I find that on the cockpit OBJ? Well, it's right here. Anim rotate begin 1, 0, 0. So the trans is the point in space. The rotation is 1, 0, 0. And then the next thing you want to know is your pitch numbers. So I've got negative 18 and 5. Okay. What does that mean? Well, that's the angle that it pitches when it pulls back and pushes forward. How do I get those numbers? Well, if you look in the cockpit OBJ, you can see that this has got a rotate key. They don't always have these rotate keys. Sometimes it's a little easier and it's all on one line on the rotate, which I'll show you. That's how it is on the roll down here, and that's how it is in some of the cockpit OBJs. But in this one, it's got keys. Well, don't let these keys scare you. All this means is that when it's at negative 1 on the data ref, because these yokes go from negative 1 to 1. When it's at negative 1 on the data ref, it's at negative 18 degrees. When it's at 1 all the way forward, it's at 5 degrees, positive 5. So what are your two data refs? Negative 18 and 5, right? If I look out here, it's negative 18 and 5. And that's it. Now you've set your pitch island. Your pitch island here is now done. Now let's do the roll island. It's very much the same. If you look, it's set in a 3, 3, 2 format. You've got your point in space, which is right here. And actually, this is what I'm looking at is actually this one. So on this one, this is the MD80. That's the vrconfig that I've got pulled up. Your point in space on the vrconfig is right here, right? For the roll axis. For the pitch axis, it's down here. And you notice those numbers were different. If I look, it's like, okay, well, this one on the Y is down at negative 0.25 on the pitch, but this one on the roll is at 0.3. So it's literally almost a meter higher. Well, that makes sense, right? Because it's way up here. Okay, and so in the cockpit OBJ, if I look, it's down here. And first of all, this is your point in space because it's anim trans. Remember, anim trans gives you your point in space, the first 3 numbers, X, Y, Z. So you find roll ratio to make sure you're on the right chunk. Now there's 2 of them here. How do I know I'm on the right one? Well, because this one starts with a negative number on the X. That means I'm to the left side of the center of gravity. That means I'm on the pilot side. This one is positive number on the X. That means that's the co-pilot side. So make sure you're tuning it to the correct one. So these 3 numbers, X, Y, and Z, is your point in space, right? That's the first thing you do. Got it. Boom. Copy, paste, done. All right. 0, 0, 1 Now that makes sense, because that's your roll axis. 0 on the X, because it's not going side to side. 0 on the Y, it's not going up and down. 1 on the Z, because sure, why not? It's got to go right through it, right through the dead center, because this sucker rotates around that guy, right? If I come in here and I go to animation time, take the roll ratio, and I rotate, see how it rotates around that axis, right? And so 0, 0, 1. Sometimes it's 0, 0, -1, and that's fine. Either way, it's fine. It's just however they built it. You just go with the numbers in the cockpit OBJ. If you do that, you can hardly never be wrong, okay? Now, remember when I said sometimes they're not rotate keys, sometimes it's all on the same line? Well, here it is. Here's a good example. Anim rotate, 0, 0, 1. And then 55 and -55. 55 is the degrees it rotates towards the left. -55 is the degrees it rotates towards the right. And you just put that at the end, right? And that tunes your spinning around that axis. It's simple, man. You just go with the numbers. It's like these 3 numbers is the point in space. These 3 numbers are the animation axis, the yellow line. And these 2 numbers are your left and your right, right? And if I go into the SR71 OBJ here, I can look. Remember when we were doing it on that last live stream, it said 0 and -17. Well, why would that not be 17 and -17? Well, let's talk about that real quick, okay? First of all, if you look here, 0 is dead center. So remember, it's -1 to 1. And right now, this rotate is just representing what happens from 0 to 1. If this here said -1 to 1 on the data ref, then this would say positive 17.4913. It would say that if that's how they set it up. But they set it up with just a 0 on the 0 and -17 on the 1. Whenever it does that, X-Plane automatically knows that if it's 0 to 1 right here on the rotation axis and you have it on -1, it's going to automatically reciprocate it back to -17.493 and 17.4913. Okay, so that's why when we put that in there, that's how I knew that's what it was, and that's how I knew which side was negative and which side was positive. I just looked at the numbers, and because I have an understanding of it, then I can make sure I get that done. So that's how you do it. It's real simple on the Yoke Manip rotate. You break it up into 2 distinct islands. You've got 3 numbers that set the pitch location of orientation, right? And you find that under the anim transline. And then you got the 1, 0, 0, and you find that under the anim rotate line in the cockpit OBJ on the pitch, right? Anim rotate 1, 0, 0, or rotate begin 1, 0, 0. That's just your yellow line. And then you've got your degrees of rotation. Same thing here. You got your location, your yellow line, and your degrees of rotation. And that's it. That's exactly how it gets done. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I hope this cleared some things up. Thanks. Talk soon.